What's going on? Jonathan Johnson here from the Johnson firm in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm with my brother, Adam. Today, we're going to continue talking about DWIs. When you're pulled over on the side of the road, the standard field sobriety tests that are performed.
Do you saw a standardized field sobriety test? I've never seen one. My advice is that, anytime you're asked to do the standardized field sobriety test, just assert your right to an attorney. Now their fear is that if you do that, you're more likely to get arrested. Well, if you assert your right to an attorney and a police officer arrests you, okay, believe me, you were getting arrested prior to him asking that question.
Yeah, the decision about whether or not you're going to be arrested has probably already been made before they even ask you to take the standardized field sobriety test.
I think I have between 3 and 6 right now where they did that, and the police officer said, well, if you don't do the standardized field sobriety test, then I've got to make a decision on what I have right now. Okay, good. So make the decision on what you have right now. A person who is not admitted to drinking, has not exhibiting slurred speech, and is perfectly fine on video. He was still arrested.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to do a scientific test, or rather an unscientific test in the way that they're, performed by the, officers that perform them sometimes. He's not going to, jump on one leg, walk 9 steps, turn. He's not going to do anything to prove that, he's not going to be arrested. And a lot of times when this happens too is on a first offense. They know they're going to take you down there, ask you to take the breathalyzer test, and then they're going to release you on a summons. So they're just, taking you down there for a couple of hours. They don't realize all of the baggage that comes along with a DWI, all the license suspension we talked about in another video.
Yeah.
So, most of the time it's like, okay, well, you're just going to come with me for a few hours, right? Yeah. And so it's not like, hey, I'm throwing they don't see it as I'm throwing the cuffs on you, I'm arresting you, I'm threatening your liberty, I'm threatening your job. They see it as like, I'm just going to take you to, and you hear them talk about it on the videos, the police officers.
That's what I was going to ask you about, because we've actually seen those videos where, they go over and they're talking to you, and all this stuff is recorded, supposed to be recorded on the body cams.
If it's not recorded, it's their problem, not yours.
That's right. But you'll hear them tell the person that they've pulled over, hey, we want you to take the standard field sobriety test. If you don't take it, then it's more likely that you're going to get arrested, or they say something to that effect. And then they go back to their unit, and as they're kind of talking to themselves or radioing in, they may mention, oh, I'm arresting this guy either way. Right. I mean, we've actually heard that said on video. Now, they didn't realize they said it at the time, or that it was being recorded, or maybe that somebody was actually going to go and look at that video.
Yeah, exactly right.
But case that stuff happens. We know they've made an arresting decision already if they're asking you to do that. What they're looking for, and what's critical, I think critically important, is to understand that they're looking for evidence of guilt at that point.
That's definitely right.
They are trying to have you provide information to them that proves their first suspicion that you're impaired.
That's right. So if you, and it, I mean,
so shut them down. Hey, I would like to talk to an attorney, and that's the end. But let's say you found yourself in a situation where you didn't follow that advice, and now you're outside of your vehicle, and you have a police officer, and he's going to conduct the standard field sobriety test. So let's walk through what they are for. What are the 3 most common standard field sobriety tests?
So the 3 battery tests that they most commonly use are the horizontal gaze nystagmus test. That's where they hold the stylus up 12 to 15 inches, slightly above eye level. They check for equal tracking, and they run through a I'm not going to get too technical, but we know them very, very technically. You can trust that.
And even before you go there, one of the attorneys on staff, 20 years state police,
22 years,
22 years state police, and he actually taught the academy on the standard field sobriety.
That's correct.
So as much of a guru in the standard field sobriety test as you can be, works in this building.
Well, already a couple of times in court, it's come up where he said, who trained you? And he was sitting next to me in court, and the witness said, him. And that helps with the judge.
Yeah, sure.
So,
all right. So back to the battery of tests.
HGN test, the first one. Then there's the walk and turn. That's where arms down by your side, right foot in front of the left foot with the heel of your right foot against the toe of your left foot. They want you to take 9 steps, looking down, count your steps out loud, turn around, and come back. The next test is a 1-leg stand test. And that's where, using any foot, you lift your foot 6 inches off the ground, parallel to the ground, and you count to 30. And the hope is that you don't put it down. What I can tell you is that none of these tests are performed the way that they're supposed to be performed. So if I'm going to take a test and it's going to be performed in a way that it's not supposed to be performed in, or the instructions are not going to be given the right way, and it's not going to be graded the right way, then how are you ever going to pass that test?
Well, let's talk about the word standardized.
Yeah,
I think because that has a very technical meaning, but I don't think that's the way it's applied in the field. how these officers are doing it. So the word standardized, this is put out by a national organization, NHTSA, right?
That's right.
All right, what's NHTSA?
National Highway Traffic Safety Association.
All right. So NHTSA puts out these guidelines and they say this is the standardized field sobriety test. And by standardized, it means this is the way it has to be done. And if it is done exactly as we instruct you to do it, then there is a degree of reliability in the results.
That's right.
It's not 100% though.
No.
So you can actually perform it as a test giver exactly as the book says. And even doing that, there's a systematic
I've never
rate of error.
Yeah, sure. But you're right. But I've never seen a client, I've graded them and said, hey, that's a pass. He absolutely does it right. I've never had a, police officer so far, I think, ever put anything other than they performed poorly on the standardized field sobriety test.
Right.
So, but even the test itself, I think the HGN is the most reliable one. They cite studies that say it's 77% accurate, but it doesn't test for a level of impairment. It just tests for alcohol in the system via the eye jerk. 2 is the walk and turn. I think that's somewhere between 60%, accurate, they claim. And then the one leg stand test is a little over 50% because, you're not supposed to give it to half the people they give it to.
That's the way it's supposed to be done. There's a manual. They're trained on it. And it's supposed to be given the exact same way every single time. That is not what we see in these videos. In fact, the war stories that you could tell, are kind of hilarious. The first one, the HGM, we've seen the officers hold a light right behind it. We've seen them have their finger way up here when it's supposed to be here. Seen them go out and do this. Is that the way you're supposed to do it?
No, and I'll tell you the most common error we see, which should not be an error that's really made, is when you're doing onset of nystagmus or maximum deviation, which is nystagmus at maximum deviation, they're to take it to where there's no white left in the eye, right? Slightly above eye level, 12 to 15 inches, slightly above eye level. They're supposed to bring it out to the right and to the left. Everything's supposed to be tested twice, but they're supposed to leave it there for a minimum of 4 seconds. So one of the first things that we do when we're looking at HGN tests is fast forward to that part, because so many times, and by so many times, I mean probably 9 out of 10, they just don't even hold the stylus there for a minimum of 4 seconds. Why is that important?
That's where your eyes is bouncing.
Yeah, but it's also because innocent people that have not had a lick of alcohol, all right, they sometimes have nystagmus for up to 4 seconds. So the reason that they're holding it there for a minimum of 4 seconds is because they're actually differentiating between innocent people and guilty people. So it's like, if you don't hold it there for 4 seconds, then you're not even trying.
Well, and let's look. I'm not going to ask you for a specific number. I know you've cross-examined a bunch of officers on the HGN.
Yeah, that's right. Even the one that came to work for us, I cross-examined.
When you go through that, do they know that information right there? They know, when you're confronting them with the manual and you say, hey, it says you're supposed to hold this out here for 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And they'll concede they were supposed to. A lot of times they'll admit they didn't. Sometimes you have to show them the video and show them that they came right back. But do you find that they actually understand the why, or that they know the why?
No.
Right. Because that information of, hey, a completely sober person, someone without any alcohol in their system at all, will demonstrate nystagmus up to 4 seconds. So you need to hold it over there to determine whether or not you're dealing with a perfectly innocent person or somebody that is actually impaired. They don't know the why on that.
That's right.
They're just told, hey, hold it over there for 4 seconds. And in most of the cases, they don't.
That's right. And that's just, I think that goes to support, what, we were saying earlier, which is that, look, the tests are done so they can, once they decide to offer you the test, you get the cuffs put on you, you're going downtown.
Right.
It ain't about the tests.
How many cues are there for the HGN?
HGN is 6 clues. And I should point out, you're lucky if you see it these days, because most of the police officers, a lot of them are wearing their body cam on their hip. Well, when a police officer is wearing his body cam on your hip and he does the HGN test, particularly when it's state police, you can't see your eyes. Yeah. You can't even see how they do it. So oftentimes we got to get the dash cam footage to just kind of zoom out. And then I'm watching his hand, but I still can't see the client's eyes. Just because they have on a body cam doesn't mean everything's on video.
Yeah. And if you got a body cam policy that says it's supposed to be worn up here and I'm putting it right here. Okay. Got a policy. You're not following the policy. Same can be said about, I have a standardized field sobriety test that I'm supposed to give a certain way.
That's right.
And we're just supposed to trust that you gave it the right way.
There's a great sentence in the manual too. It says, if you don't do the test, if any one of the elements of the test is compromised, the validity, or is changed, the validity of the test is compromised. It doesn't say maybe compromised. It says is compromised.
If it's not standardized, it's junk science. So after the HGN, what's the next one?
Walk and turn test. 9 steps, turn around, take 9 steps, come back. I'll be honest, based on the way that test is, the instructions are usually given, if you can just manage not to fall over, all right, then my guess is the officer's performance, in his demonstration is going to be worse than my client's performance. I'm just telling you, the way that they do those tests and demonstrate them are just routinely really, really bad. And what I'll do in court is literally take a sheet of paper, hold it over the side of the screen, and just have the court during cross-examination
Judge the
officer's demonstration before we look at the clients.
Yeah.
And a lot of judges take the position that if you don't do the test the right way, you don't get any credit from the test.
And that's how they should take it. One case that I recall specifically is they send them on this line.
Yeah.
And there's actually no line.
Yeah,
The line is imaginary.
They're supposed to designate a real or imaginary line. Well, it's tough to tell somebody to keep their foot on the line you never designate or tell them about. So I'm like, did you literally not tell him about the line on the walk and turn? I missed that.
Where are we at on the third test?
One leg stand. And I'll be honest, that's the least trusted case there is. I've even heard judges sometimes say that, like, I don't think I could do that. And what you do is you stand there, legs together, arms at your sides. You lift your whatever foot you want, whatever leg you want. You keep your legs straight. You point it parallel to the ground. You hold it 6 inches off the ground. And the idea is you're supposed to count to 30 outline, 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. Most of the time, as long as you're just not absolutely falling over, then we're going to have a defense to that test, because judges don't trust it anyway, because most of our judges, what's the road? What road are we talking about? Like, if you're on Common Street in Lake Charles, people think, oh man, that's a kind of a nice road. It's a concrete road. It is a dome. It is designed to shed water as quickly as it possibly can. So you'll see the client sometimes looking, and I'll be in a young prosecutor's office, and they'll say, oh, see how bad he looks? And I'm like, have you been to Common Street? Have you looked at Common Street? Like, it's sloped. That dude's actually making up for the slope. And so these are just all things. And I think people just on DWIs, especially when they blow, over the limit, they just think like, oh man, I don't have a defense. I've got to go down there.
Perfect example. You see young lady gets out. She's performed the standard field sobriety test, and she's sitting there in some 3-inch heels.
Yeah. Never. It's very rare that police officers give them the opportunity to take those things off. If they, it's been a long time since I've, seen a police officer say, hey, you can take your shoes off. If you're wearing heels, the manual specifically requires you to give them the opportunity to take that test barefoot.
Or, hey, do you have any ailments? Did you?
They're going to ask.
Right. They're supposed to.
Yeah, right.
They're supposed to inquire about that stuff. Because if you've got a leg injury and now that I'm asking you to stand up there for 30 seconds and you fall down at 15 seconds, that might have been a personal best for you with the injury you have.
Yeah.
But that's a fail.
Well, by the way, all of your merit rights, by the way, are usually not given prior to you taking the standardized field sobriety test. So it's important that people realize that you have in Louisiana, when you're detained, when you're less than just arrested, you have a right to be told, what's going on here. You're being investigated for DWI. You have the right to a lawyer. That never happens.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, people are thinking, man, I still got a really good chance of walking away from this thing. If they were told, hey, you're being detained, you have the right to a lawyer, they'd be like, oh, okay, no.
Or if they were just given the stats on whether they perform the test or don't perform the test, what percentage of time they're getting arrested.
That's right.
If somebody said, hey, look, whether you perform this test or you don't, you're going to be arrested 95% of the time.
That's right.
Everybody would shut it down right there and go for it. Hey, I want to talk to an attorney.
Yeah, where are all the videos of people getting let go on DWIs? That's what I want to see. Who's got them?
The last thing that you said that I want to hit on before we close this one out is you said, oh, I think I blew, so I'm going to be convicted anyway, so I don't need to get an attorney. I just need to go to my arraignment and plead guilty.
Yeah.
The standardized field sobriety test, if done improperly, and if they're thrown out by the court, then that breathalyzer is thrown out by the court because they didn't even have the right, the probable cause to ask you to take the breathalyzer if they didn't do these things right.
That's right. So 70%, probably 70% of the time, the client has, blown over the legal limit. We still win 90% of the time. So it's because we have to file a motion to suppress, and we have to argue basically based on the evidence, including the standardized field sobriety test, which were, again, very rarely, if ever done properly, then there was no probable cause to arrest my client. And we have good judges that look at, know that, hey, I'm excluding technically evidence that, might show that he was impaired, but we've got to honor the Constitution.
We still got to do it the right way.
That's right. The means have to justify the ends, not the ends justify the means. So a lot of times, if you go talk to an attorney, the easy way to kind of handle a case is to say, "Oh, well, I'll get you in a pretrial diversion," right? Like a lot of people just take that because it's sort of it's a not a quick way, but it's a long way to ultimately get your case dismissed.
An expensive way.
Right. And once you're
It's a fundraiser.
once you're done with pretrial eligibility, you're done for pretrial eligibility. So what I tell people is like, hey, look, if you
Hold on, let's don't breeze past that.
Yep.
You can only do pretrial one time.
That's correct. That's correct.
So if you had a defensible case, where they had done this field sobriety test wrong, and you could get the breathalyzer thrown out, and the prosecutor had no choice but to just dismiss the case.
Right.
But instead, you just entered the pretrial diversion, and then you make the unfortunate mistake of years later having this situation occur to you again.
Yeah.
You can't do pretrial at that point.
That's correct. And another thing is pretrial takes a long time, and it bars your ability to expunge the DWI arrest for 5 years. So I don't know why that's the case, because that laws never make sense to me. But
it is long.
If you go talk to an attorney, he's like, oh man, yeah, you need to hire me. I can get you into that pretrial diversion program. Understand this. Every single person, all right, at least on a first offense, is going to get offered pretrial diversion. So he's not doing you any favors. He's not doing you any solid. You're going to automatically be, offered that. What our job is to do is try and beat pretrial diversion, trying to get it dismissed or reduced down to some minor traffic, violation where you pay a $100 fine and go home and your license is suspended, and then we can instantly get it expunged off your record.
Hit your insurance, all of this.
All those good things.
Yeah. So pretrial diversion is not the end all be all of these cases. It's actually the starting point on these DWI first offenses that you're saying, hey, look, that's going to be there.
Yeah, you have that walking into our door.
Let's go see if we can if they have a real case here against you.
That's exactly right.
We appreciate y'all checking this out, and make sure you take a look at the YouTube page for more content coming up later.